Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Bava, Kamma. We are up to Perek Hey Mishnah Zayin. Today's Mishnayot should be Le'ilu Nishmat, Neria ben Svetlana, Ranbai, Eliyahu ben Burchai Israelov, Chana bad Miriam, Sason ben Ryan, Yoshua ben Shifra, Meluchatam began Eden, Amen. And Le'avdi ben Chaim, Le'chaim, V'derefuah Shelemav, Daniel Shalom ben Rosa, Betoch Shah Chole Israel. Although the verse that speaks of damage caused by a pit mentions only an ox and a donkey, as we saw in the previous Mishnayot, this Mishnah teaches that the verse's laws apply to other animals as well. The Mishnah then goes on to teach that the same is true of other verses in the Torah that mention only certain animals. The Mishnah begins, Echad shov, Echad kol behema. The same law that applies to an ox applies also to any domestic animal in regard to the following laws. Now the commentaries point out the term behema refers to domestic animals such as cows, sheep, and goats. The Mishnah states below that wild animals and birds are also included. Now, number one in Nefilat Abor, paying damages for its falling into a pit. Ulafrashad al Sinai, number two, separation from Mount Sinai, the giving of the Torah. When the Shekhinah, the divine presence, rested upon Mount Sinai, animals and people were not allowed to go on the mountain or even to touch its edge, as it is stated in the book of Shemot, chapter 19, verses 12 and 13. Beware of ascending the mountain or touching its edge. Whoever touches the mountain, whether animal, behema, or person, he shall not live. Although the Torah uses the word behema, domestic animal, the prohibition applied to all types of animals. Ultashlume chefel, number three, the double payment that a thief must make for stealing an animal. The Torah commands a thief to pay the owner double, meaning the item he stole or its value, plus an additional fine of the same amount. The source for this double payment is the verse in the book of Shemot, chapter 22, verse 3. If the theft shall be found in his possession, whether it is a live ox or a donkey or a seh, a word that refers to sheep and goats, he shall pay double. This law too pertains to all animals, despite the fact that the verse mentions only certain species. In fact, the double payment must be made even by one who steals an inanimate object. As stated in chapter 7, Mishnah 1, the double payment obligation is nevertheless listed here, because this is another example of a verse that specifies certain animals, and yet its law does not apply to them alone. V'lashavat aveda, number four, returning a lost animal. It is a mitzvah to return a lost object to its owner, as the Torah states in the book of Dvarim, chapter 22, verse 1, you shall not see the ox of your brother or his seh, sheep or goat going astray, and hide yourself from them. You shall surely return them to your brother. The Mishnah teaches that the mitzvah applies to all types of animals. Here too, even inanimate objects are included, as verse 3 there states, so shall you do for any lost article of your brother. Lifrika, number 5, unloading a burden from an animal. One must help to unload a burden from an animal that is struggling beneath it, as the Torah states in the book of Shemot, chapter 23, verse 5, if you see the donkey of your enemy sitting under its load, would you refrain from helping him unload it? You must surely help with him. The obligation applies to all animals, not just donkeys. Now there is a parallel mitzvah to help someone load an animal's burden has fallen off. Regarding this mitzvah as well, though the Torah mentions only an ox and a donkey in the book of Dvarim, chapter 22, verse 4, all animals are included. Lachasima, number 6, the prohibition of muzzling an animal when it is threshing grain. The Torah in Dvarim, chapter 25, verse 4, commands you shall not muzzle an ox when it is threshing or performing other kinds of agricultural labor. This prohibition applies to all animals, not just oxen. Lichilaim, number 7, the prohibition of kilaim, mating or plowing with two different species of animals together. Now there are two prohibitions that concern the mixing of two types of animals. The Torah forbids mating different species of animals together, as it states in the book of Vayikra, chapter 19, verse 19, you shall not mate your animal behema with another species. It also forbids making different species work together in the book of Dvarim, chapter 22, verse 10, you shall not plow with an ox and a donkey together. All types of animals are included in both prohibitions. Ula Shabbat, and number 8, the prohibition of having one's animals work on Shabbat. It is written in the book of Dvarim, chapter 5, verse 14, but the 7 days Shabbat to Hashem your God, you shall not do any work, you, your son, your daughter, your male slave, your female slave, your ox, your donkey, and your every animal behema. This prohibition applies to all living creatures, even wild animals and birds, as the Mishnah teaches below. Now, in every one of these 8 cases, the same rules that apply to an ox or the other animals mentioned in the various verses apply to all domestic animals. The Gemara on page 54 in Masechet Bava Kamma derives from verses referring to these laws that they apply to all creatures. Furthermore, any wild beast or bird is the same as domestic animals in these matters. The Mishnah explains why the Torah mentions only certain animals. If so, that the law about damage done by a pit applies to all other animals and birds. Why is it stated in ox or donkey? It is only because the verse speaks about the usual case, meaning the Torah mentions the ox and the donkey because it was common for these animals to walk freely in the streets where they might fall into a pit. Since oxen were used for threshing grain and other field work, and donkeys were used to carry burdens, these animals were frequently on the streets. Similarly, to illustrate each of the laws listed earlier, the Torah chose the most common examples, and that is the end of Perek Hey, Mishnah Zayin. We continue with Perek Vav, Mishnah Aleph. After discussing damage caused by a pit, a bull, the tractate returns to the subject of damage done by an animal either through eating shen or through walking regel. As a rule, if the owner of an animal secured it but it nevertheless escaped and did damage, he does not have to pay. This Mishnah defines how well a person must secure his animal in order to be exempt from payment. If someone brought a sheep into a pen and locked the gate before it properly, meaning the gate can withstand a normal wind, but an unusually strong wind blew it open, and the sheep got out and damaged another person's property, patur, he is not obligated to pay for the damage because he fulfilled this duty by locking it up in a way that would secure it in normal circumstances. Although the owner of an animal must prevent it from doing damage, it is enough for him to use methods that are effective in normal circumstances. He does not have to secure it in a superior way, which prevents the animal from doing damage even in circumstances that are unusual. Even a Remeir who requires superior security in chapter 4, Mishnah 9, applies the standard only in the case of preventing a mu'ad from doing carrying damage. He agrees that normal supervision is enough with respect to regel and shen, as the Gemara discusses in page 55b in Masechet Bava Kamma. Lo nal b'fanei karui, but if he did not lock the gate before it properly, meaning the gate cannot withstand even a normal wind, v'yatzav v'zikan, and it got out and did damage, chayav, he is obligated to pay because he locked it up in a way that would not work even in normal circumstances. Now, having ruled about a sheep that escaped through the gate of its pen, the Mishnah now rules about one that escaped through a hole in the wall. If the owner of the sheep locked the pen properly, but its wall was breached in an unexpected manner, meaning the wall was sturdy, but the sheep somehow made a hole in it, or it collapsed by itself because of some unforeseeable circumstance. Now, if the owner of the sheep locked the pen properly, but its wall was breached in an unexpected manner at night, or robbers breached it at night, v'yatzav v'zikan, and got out through the gap in the wall and damaged another person's property, patur, he is not obligated to pay for the damage because the wall broke through no fault of his own. The owner is exempt from payment only if the wall was breached at night, as implied by the Mishnah. Since a hole in the wall is unlikely to be seen at night, the owner presumably did not know about it, therefore he cannot be blamed for failing to run after his escaped animal and prevent it from doing damage. But if the wall was breached in the daytime when people would have seen and told the owner, he is obligated to recover the animal, and if he fails to do so, he is responsible for what it does. In the Mishnah's previous case, where the gate was blown open, there is no difference between day and night. People who see an open gate do not realize that anything is wrong and will not say anything to its owner. Even in the daytime, then he might not have known that the gate was open, and so we cannot hold him liable for failing to retrieve the animal. Now, in the previous case, neither the owner nor the robbers have to pay for the damage done by the sheep. The owner is exempt because he secured the sheep properly, and the robbers are exempt because they do not own the sheep, and they cause the damage only indirectly. Only the owner of an animal is liable for damage that he indirectly caused it to do. For example, he failed to secure it properly and it got out and did damage. Anyone else is not liable unless he made the animal do damage directly. In our case, the robbers are neither the owners nor did they cause the animal to do damage directly. Thus, they are not required to pay since the damage was only indirectly. The Mishnah now presents a case in which the robbers are obligated to pay. Hotziu listim, if the robbers took it out of the pen and it damaged someone's property, listim chayavim, the robbers are obligated to pay for the damage by taking it out. They performed an act of acquisition, kinyan, with the animal, which makes it theirs in certain ways, including giving them the responsibility to prevent it from doing damage. When one buys something, he does not acquire it until he performs a kinyan, an act of acquisition with it. Similarly, if one takes something from another person without permission, he has not committed theft. which makes him responsible for the stolen object until he performs a kinyan. There are several types of kinyanim, acts of acquisitions that can be performed with an animal. One is a simple act of pulling the animal, which is called mishicha, pulling. In the Mishnah's case, therefore, after the robbers took the sheep out of the pen, performing mishicha, pulling, they are responsible to prevent it from doing damage, and if it does do damage, they must pay. Now, it's not necessary for the robbers to actually pull the animal, otherwise make it walk. Even if they just surround it in such a way that it would go only in one direction, they're considered to have performed the kinyan. The sages decreed that it is a kinyan in order to punish the robbers. And that is the Rabotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen v'amen.